Evidence secured at marker 4. Advise command we are holding the scene.
Copy that. It's getting heavier out here.
Names of contractors and workers who were working in the neighborhood on those houses, on those construction
The FBI successfully pulled thumbnail files from the digital security cameras positioned around Nancy Guthrie's high-end property. These snapshots spanned weeks before she disappeared, capturing landscapers, pool maintenance crews, and various visiting family members. ABC News originally reported the recovery of that footage, while CBS News confirmed it, with insiders telling both networks that nothing appeared suspicious. But we have to ask the one question being ignored. Who else was working in that neighborhood that January? Have detectives truly interrogated every single one? Because a gardener from Nancy's block just came forward with a claim that should be headlines, he informed a reporter that in the long weeks following Nancy Guthrie's sudden disappearance, the police never once attempted to interview him. That silence shocked him. It shocked me. It should absolutely shock you. If you have followed this series, you already understand the basic, dark shape of this missing persons case. Nancy Guthrie was last seen on the evening of January 31st, after her son-in-law, Tomaso Chioni, dropped her at home. It was roughly 9:48 that night. She was officially reported missing the next morning, February 1st, after missing her virtual church service. The FBI joined the search early on. A joint task force remains aggressively active today. You have seen suspects, theories, and evidence threads that the public has only ever glimpsed in tiny, disconnected pieces. This story begins with a lone gardener standing in a yard near where Nancy regularly walked her dog, and it concludes with a question that fundamentally alters how you view who possessed the access and the opportunity. In exclusive enclaves like the Catalina Foothills, the actual residents are almost entirely invisible to the outside world. They work remotely, they travel often, they hire staff to maintain their massive properties. The people who are actually visible, the ones outside on the streets and moving through the yards, are not the residents. Instead, they are the landscapers, pool maintenance crews, and contractors moving through side gates, alleys, and various delivery entrances. They are HVAC specialists, pest control workers, window washers, and laborers. They are construction crews building additions or replacing roofs, along with delivery drivers and security system technicians. In neighborhoods like the Catalina Foothills, these individuals are present every single day of the week. They come and go with such regularity that the residents themselves have long since stopped noticing their presence. Yet visibility works both ways. These workers see every detail of the lives inside. They know which house has cameras and where they point. They see which driveways are empty by 8 in the morning. They hear private conversations through open windows while they are busy trimming the hedges. They notice when a routine changes, a car goes missing, or a new person begins appearing. Criminologists call this ambient surveillance the passive, total knowledge gained simply by occupying a residential space repeatedly. Workers in these neighborhoods absorb this intel without trying. Consider a killer who clearly knew Nancy's routine, clearly knew her property and had a plan. The question of who else held that knowledge is central. He clearly understood the layout of her property and had executed a precise, calculated plan. So, identifying who else held that same ambient knowledge of her life is not a minor detail. It is the core. ABC News first reported that the FBI recovered those thumbnail images from the security cameras on Nancy's property. CBS News confirmed that weeks of thumbnails existed before February 1st, coming from motion-activated cameras at the pool and side yards. According to sources familiar with the investigation, these images showed only workers and family, nothing suspicious. But one detail was buried that changes everything about this entire case. This is arguably one of the most significant facts in the entire search for Nancy Guthrie. Those same cameras, which captured routine activity for weeks before she vanished, captured absolutely nothing the night she was taken. Not a single motion-triggered image. Not one frame of footage exists. On the night of the abduction, the cameras went dark. Investigators described this specific failure as, quote, odd. The cameras worked perfectly before and after. But during that one critical window, they saw nothing. This tracks with the Wi-Fi jammer theory we have explored throughout this series. It suggests the abductor used a device to kill the wireless signal in the neighborhood, disabling the cameras remotely. Several neighbors reported internet blackouts that same night, and their Ring cameras failed during that exact window. This remains a confirmed lead in the investigation. A key witness works on Nancy Guthrie's street every week, yet the FBI never even knocked. Whoever snatched Nancy knew exactly how to ghost her security cameras. That precision only comes from cold, hard preparation. Let's dissect what those thumbnails actually reveal, or, more importantly, what they hide. Nancy's lens only saw Nancy's property. They capture who hit the gate, who walked the drive, and who stood at her front or side door. But what about the landscaper 3 houses down, or the crew framing a house on the next street? A man sitting in a truck watching for 45 minutes straight wouldn't trigger a single alert or thumbnail image. This is the danger of the surveillance radius gap. In the sprawling Catalina Foothills, this blind spot is massive. If someone watched Nancy for weeks from a neighboring yard, from a dusty job site, or a parked truck just outside her camera's narrow field of view, those digital eyes saw nothing, and the FBI thumbnails would have looked perfectly normal to any investigator. So when sources claim the footage shows nothing suspicious, they are telling the truth. But it's only half the story. On March 13th, a local gardener finally broke the silence and spoke to a journalist from JLR Investigates. The Mirror US reported it. The Irish Star ran with it too, and his claim is honestly terrifying given where this investigation currently stands.
The pool cleaning employees in the backyard, that really kind of seemed odd to me. That was her routine maintenance?
Well, it would seem odd to me that you have an investigation going on and you allow someone to come in that could possibly contaminate some of the crime scene, even though it has been released and brought back. It's just not something I would do until this case got further down the road.
Yeah, that's...
Here is the kicker. He says the police never spoke to him. Not once. No detective, no federal agent, nothing. Not a single investigator knocked on his door or stopped his truck to ask what he'd seen over the months. He was stunned by the silence. He also noted the last time he saw Nancy was 8 months to a year ago. He remembered a quick, friendly exchange catching her in the morning, saying hello. That was his final memory of her. Think about the implications. This man is a fixture in her neighborhood. He knows every shortcut and every resident. He knows the daily rhythms of that street, yet he was never questioned. I need to be crystal clear here. I am not labeling this gardener a suspect or accusing him of any wrongdoing in this case. I am saying he is a vital witness, and the fact that he was ignored suggests the investigative net is full of holes. A standard search for a high-profile kidnapping victim should be exhaustive. Every single person with regular access to that residential block needs to be identified and cleared by the police. That means the mail carriers and every delivery driver. This means every construction worker. And it absolutely includes the landscapers and gardeners working the very street where the victim lived and breathed. If they missed this man by March 13th, how many other workers are out there? And what exactly did those workers see? The gardener couldn't pinpoint the date, but he knew it had been at least 8 months since he saw her. That window of time is massive, and the range itself tells a story all its own. A man works on her street for a year and never once physically lays eyes on the resident. In a quiet, high-end enclave, that is a glaring anomaly for any worker. It suggests Nancy hadn't been a visible figure in her own front yard or driveway for quite some time. Perhaps she was away, traveling, sticking to a different part of the property, or changing her outdoor habits entirely. Or, and this is the chilling part, maybe she was already being careful. We've talked about how this wasn't random, that someone was planning this and had some level of inside knowledge. If Nancy felt someone's eyes on her in the months leading up to February, she might have changed her ways. That prolonged absence from her own front yard might not be a coincidence at all. But consider this. If a regular worker hadn't seen her in a year, we have to find out who actually did see her. The timeline of her last neighborhood sighting is suddenly the most important piece of this entire puzzle. Who saw her walk her dog or get the mail in late January? Did her routine suddenly become visible again? And who was waiting for that? Let's dig into the construction site specifically, because the video title mentions a very specific worker. Imagine a kidnapper hiding in plain sight, protected by a permit and a vest. This angle matters enormously. Listen, I need to be straightforward. No individual construction worker has been publicly named or officially labeled as a person of interest in this active and ongoing investigation today. If others suggest otherwise, they are simply outpacing the facts. I refuse to speculate in that reckless manner. Instead, I will demonstrate why construction in the Catalina Foothills during January and early February is a vital lead that the FBI must pursue aggressively if they are not already investigating every single crew on those specific active sites. These Catalina Foothills neighborhoods feature massive property values, where high-end home renovation is constant, while new builds on vacant lots happen daily. During January, just weeks before Nancy disappeared, active crews were working nearby. These projects sat within visual and logistical range of her. Laborers on those sites were present every single morning. They built a visible, predictable routine of their own. Crucially, these men had a perfectly valid reason to remain stationary in that specific neighborhood for entire days. Consider the lines of sight. A crew working just 1 or 2 blocks from Nancy's residence could clearly see her street. They watched her vehicle come and go. They studied her daily habits from a distance. A work truck parked on a corner raises 0 red flags. Nobody calls the cops on a contractor. No one checks IDs on a busy crew when half the neighborhood is under renovation. That is the ultimate urban cover for a predator. Invisible, legitimate, and zero suspicion cover. In a kidnapping involving heavy surveillance and precise timing, that kind of cover is everything. Did the Bureau pull the records? Tucson's building permits are public. Every active project in those foothills during January is theoretically traceable through the city's digital permit database, meaning every single contractor who pulled a permit remains easily identifiable. Every licensed crew operating in that zip code during that window is findable on paper. The real question is whether investigators have performed that cross-referencing and actually pulled those vital permit records, mapped every active site near Nancy's home, and interviewed every laborer present in that zone throughout January and early February. Were they thorough enough to speak with every person on those specific sites? A gardener told JLR Investigates he was never questioned. That suggests the FBI's canvas was not nearly comprehensive enough. That is a major problem. Previously, we introduced my insider knowledge framework. The core argument of that theory was quite simple. Nancy's disappearance strongly suggests her abductor possessed intimate, surgical knowledge regarding the specific details of her private daily life, her home, her schedule, her household, and her vulnerabilities. That intelligence doesn't come from a drive-by. It requires sustained observation or direct access to a very reliable source. We applied that logic to family, friends, and hired help inside the house. Today, I am applying it to a category that has lacked sufficient public attention: the vast service worker ecosystem operating inside and around these wealthy residential neighborhoods. Think about what a worker learns during months of visits. They know gate codes because homeowners simply hand them out. They know which side doors are unlocked during the day. They know which properties have dogs and which don't. They spot the visible security cameras and, more importantly, they find the corners with zero coverage. They learn the schedules because residents tell them, "I will be out between 10 and 2 today. Just use the side gate." This is not an accusation or speculation about any specific criminal intent. This is just the standard information sharing that occurs between residents and service workers daily in neighborhoods like these Catalina Foothills. It is totally mundane information, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a literal operational blueprint. Take that a step further. What if this person never even needed access to Nancy's specific home property? What if they worked nearby long enough to construct a complete picture, house by house, and week by week? They knew who was home and when. Was Nancy's routine just one data point in a predator's mental map? We know Nancy's disappearance was certainly not a random crime of opportunity. The timing, the method, the camera tampering, and the signal jammer all prove planning. And planning requires high-level intelligence gathering. Intelligence in the Catalina Foothills is most easily gathered by a person who has a legitimate reason to be there. Someone who simply matches the visual landscape. Someone whose daily presence raises 0 red flags. A landscaper fits that mold perfectly. A construction worker fits that description too. So does a pool tech. Yet, right now, we know at least one key worker remains uninterviewed.
We continue following breaking news out of Tucson, Arizona. The FBI just releasing both a series of photos along with a video of what they are calling a potential subject in the Nancy Guthrie case. Not suspect, subject. Let's get right out to senior national correspondent Brian Enton, who is in the Tucson area for us, joins us live on the phone. Brian, this seems to be a really big deal here.
The trail of a residential abduction often leads directly to the person hired to protect the home. This pattern is not new, but it is the key to understanding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. I want to analyze this specific pattern for a moment. I am not trying to be sensational or dramatic. I am focused on how this pattern dictates exactly where detectives should be spending their energy right now. Forensic experts call the common link in these residential abductions pre-offense reconnaissance. These killers do not just snap. They observe, they learn the environment, and they track their target's every move. Crucially, they do all of this while hiding in plain sight. In high-end neighborhoods, that camouflage usually looks like a uniform, a company van, or a valid reason to stand on the sidewalk. Does that sound like a coincidence? It is not a coincidence, but this behavioral reality does not convict anyone in the Nancy Guthrie disappearance yet. It proves nothing, but it provides a proven criminal template that federal agents and profilers use as their primary roadmap. This means when a kidnapping hits an affluent zip code, interviewing every service worker isn't just a suggestion. It has to be the immediate, systematic priority of the entire task force. Yet, a man gardening on Nancy's own street was somehow never part of that initial sweep as of mid-March. That gap, 42 days after she went missing, is either a massive blunder or proof that investigators are already zeroed in on a lead so strong they do not need to look anywhere else. I cannot tell you which one it is, but history proves that narrow vision early on leads to dead ends. And when you miss a witness, you lose the evidence that actually breaks the case. But is the FBI actually missing things? They are not necessarily missing things. The FBI Joint Task Force running this entire operation has remained hauntingly quiet throughout the process. Do not mistake that silence for inactivity. There are tactical reasons to keep the cards close in a kidnapping. You never want the predator to know you are closing the distance. You do not tip your hand on the physical evidence before the handcuffs are ready. Security is everything. Here is what we know for sure. The feds are moving, and the massive video review proves they are leaning on forensics. Bringing in federal heavy hitters confirms that this is being treated with the highest level of urgency. But here we are, at the time I am recording this, 6 weeks into the hunt with no suspects named and no arrests made, which points to a grim reality. Either they are meticulously trapping a suspect, or this investigation has slammed into a brick wall. So, why leak the footage now? They leaked it because the camera footage holds a secret they need the public to unlock. The thumbnail story hitting ABC News, and then CBS, was not a leak. It was a deployment. The police do not let sensitive digital evidence reach the press unless it serves a specific purpose. There is a tactical reason why that specific data was cleared for release after 42 days. Was it a warning shot to a person in the frame, or a desperate plea for the public to identify a vehicle? If the goal was crowdsourcing, then that gardener coming forward publicly is exactly what the task force was hoping to trigger. He saw the news about the Osmo investigation. He realized no one had called him, so he called a reporter. That is a citizen doing the work. But will the feds listen? Or is there a darker reason they missed him? The reason they missed him is rooted in a reality that is difficult to talk about but impossible to ignore. The Catalina Foothills and Tucson areas rely on a massive, off-the-books labor force, day laborers, independent landscape crews, and workers who exist entirely outside of official payroll systems. These are people who might lack papers or have reasons to avoid federal agents entirely. This is not a comment on their character, Most are just people working hard to survive. But for an investigator, they represent a black hole. This informal economy creates a nightmare for a standard canvas because traditional paper trails do not exist here. You cannot just call a licensed contractor or run a background check when there are no records to pull. We are talking about workers paid in cash, who change crews weekly and do not use permanent phone numbers. These individuals are the ones who slip through the cracks of a federal investigation every single time. If one of them saw the kidnapper, that truth dies, unless the FBI gets boots on the ground in those communities. He watched her daily, but was never interviewed. Typically, feds use labor groups to reach these specific people. Did that occur here? We simply cannot say. What we know is a gardener who knew Nancy Guthrie, and her routine was not contacted by mid-March. That single fact suggests informal labor outreach, if it exists, is not thorough. One detail about the Arizona landscaping and construction scene is often underappreciated. January in Tucson is nothing like January in Minnesota. No frozen soil or blizzard stop the outdoor work. Throughout the Catalina Foothills during January, the landscaping crews remain busy. Building projects proceed on time. Pool maintenance continues 12 months a year. The number of outdoor laborers in that neighborhood before Nancy vanished was not reduced by winter. It was normal, meaning the pool of potential witnesses and individuals doing surveillance is larger than in colder climates. The workers were out. People moved through the neighborhood daily. Eyes were everywhere. Yet, it appears investigators have not spoken to everyone. Let us pause and acknowledge the truth. We do not know the full scope of the task force work. We lack access to their records. The gardener who spoke to JLR Investigates is just one data point. One man saying he was skipped. That does not prove the canvas was a failure. Federal probes often involve quiet interviews that never go public. Many worker interviews may have happened privately, without any media coverage or any public disclosure. But the gardener's statement and his choice to go to a journalist instead of agents is significant. When a witness feels they must go public to be heard, the official channels likely never reach them. That is a gap worth analyzing. Here are 3 theories for the Bureau's current position on this worker angle, and I will share my conclusion. Theory 1. The task force already handled this. They identified every worker and gathered their statements. And that intel either led nowhere or pointed to a target they are now building a case against. Secretly. The gardener who spoke out simply slipped through the cracks. Perhaps his crew was under a contractor's name, and agents missed that he needed to be reached directly. If this is true, the case is further along than we realize. Theory 2. The investigation is intentionally narrow. Investigators have a specific person in their sights and are running a targeted hunt rather than a broad search. In this version, the gardener was not interviewed because neighborhood workers were not the focus. The focus remained entirely on one known individual. The worker lead is a trail that agents deprioritized because they believe they already have their man. Theory 3. The canvas genuinely has holes. The scale of the neighborhood, plus the logistics of finding every person present over 2 weeks, created massive blind spots. The gardener from JLR Investigates represents a category of witnesses that were never fully reached. In this scenario, the most important information remains uncollected. Based on my analysis of everything in this case, the truth is likely a mix of theories 1 and 2, though theory 3 is a bigger worry than admitted. Make no mistake, with Savannah Guthrie's profile, the political pressure on this case is intense. The danger is always present. The rush to follow a hot lead can force investigators to drop the wider search before it is done. That gardener proves the job might not be finished. There is something else I have considered. The Savannah Guthrie connection made this a national story instantly, and that spotlight creates consequences. On one hand, the cameras went totally silent the moment she was taken. That surgical blackout brought in federal assets, keeping Nancy's story alive while a lower-profile case might have gone cold. That is a genuine advantage, yet national attention remains obsessively focused on the people standing closest to Nancy Guthrie. We are talking family friction, personal drama, and individuals whose names were already circulating in the public sphere near the case. The narrative weight of a high-stakes investigation always pulls towards sensational family secrets and celebrities who already have a public footprint. That is what drives clicks. Frankly, most coverage, including some of this series, has orbited around those same familiar faces. But what if the predator was not at her dinner table? Statistics show that kidnappings are not always inside jobs orchestrated by the inner circle. They often involve people on the periphery, who knew the victim's daily environment better than they ever knew the victim as a person. A contractor working on that street for months does not need to know Nancy Guthrie personally. He does not need her phone number, her social security digits, or her private family history. He just needs to know when the lights go out and when she is home alone. That is easy intelligence. In the Catalina Foothills, that data is available to anyone present and paying attention, and one specific piece of hardware might have seen him. Let us look at the camera footage, because the mainstream media has failed to explain the technical reality of these systems. When ABC News and CBS News confirmed the FBI found thumbnail images going back weeks, they meant a specific smart home feature. These security setups do not actually store continuous video footage by default. Most save motion-triggered clips while simultaneously generating low-resolution thumbnail images at regular intervals. Those small images are saved in one of two ways. They live on the device or in the cloud and can persist long after the primary video clips are deleted or overwritten. Here is why that matters for the investigation. Thumbnails provide a coarse visual timeline that reaches further back than the full video record allows, even if someone wiped the main files. They show, in broad strokes, exactly who was lurking near the property over a long period. But Nancy's setup had a fatal flaw. We know her Nest doorbell had no active subscription, which is why that footage had to be painstakingly pulled from Google's back-end systems. The thumbnail cameras on the fence and near the pool were an entirely different system. Those were motion-activated units that held onto their own residual data. That is how the FBI retrieved them weeks later when the doorbell required a technical miracle. Still, these images are not what you think. The truth is that thumbnails have massive limitations. You are looking at a grainy, motion-triggered still that rarely provides a clear facial identification in most cases. It does not show what someone was doing, only that they were physically there. There is no audio, and it definitely does not capture activity happening outside the camera's narrow field of view. So, when sources claim nothing in the thumbnails looked suspicious, remember that is a limited statement. Thumbnails are not forensics tools. They are simply intended to give a homeowner a quick visual log of activity on their property. Building a case off them is like trying to solve a crime using gas station footage from 2 blocks away. You can see that something happened, but you cannot always see the details. This FBI review is a starting point, not a verdict, telling them who visited Nancy's property. It tells them nothing about who was watching from the shadows across the street. And it explains absolutely nothing about why those same cameras went totally silent the night she vanished. The answer lies in the permits. Let us break down a proper worker canvas to see if investigators actually did the work required in a case like this. Phase 1. Pull every active building permit within a half-mile radius for the 60 days leading up to the incident, accounting for terrain. Every permit links to a contractor, and every contractor has workers. That is a paper trail you can follow. Phase 2 involves pulling business licenses for landscapers, pool techs, and pest control operating in those specific zip codes. Cross-reference those companies against the neighbors to identify who was actually working on Nancy's immediate block. Grill the owners, get the crew manifests, and talk to the workers directly before hitting the day labor sites. In Tucson, these are the hubs where informal workers gather at dawn to be picked up for various jobs. A witness with life-saving information is talking to the press because the FBI never bothered to call him. Step 4. Broadcast a specific public appeal for every worker present in the Catalina Foothills during January and February to come forward now. Not some generic tip line, but a targeted plea. If you were working there then, contact us. Make it safe. Clarify that speaking up does not make them a suspect. Now, has any of this actually happened? Phase 1 likely has, given FBI resources. Steps 2 and 3, per the gardener, appear to be unfinished. Step 4 hasn't happened. I am not saying the FBI is doing a bad job. I am saying there is a visible gap in the net. In a kidnapping where a life depends on finding the right witness, closing that gap is urgent. The phrase "closing in this video's title deserves an honest look, because I will not sit here and tell you that an arrest is imminent or that agents have a specific suspect in their sights. I do not know that. And anyone who tells you that with certainty, without any attribution, without names, without documentary evidence, is just speculating. Here is the truth. When a major piece of investigative info, like an unvetted witness publicly declaring he was never contacted, enters the public sphere via a reporter, it usually has one of two effects. Either agents already knew this man and the disclosure is irrelevant to their timeline, or they did not know, and the disclosure creates immense pressure to act. In that second scenario, closing in describes what happens next. A witness previously outside the investigative circle gets pulled in. Agents make contact. The gardener finally gets his interview. Every other worker in his orbit is identified and interviewed. Those interviews either prove that nothing was observed, or they crack the case open. That second possibility is why this thread matters. Investigations can sit flat for weeks and then get cracked wide open by one witness who happened to see something they did not know was important. The gardener may have seen nothing, or he may have seen a face, a truck, or a pattern of behavior near Nancy's street that, combined with secret FBI evidence, suddenly makes everything click. We do not know yet, but because this info is now public, and this man went to a journalist instead of waiting for agents, the pressure is on for them to respond. That is a process in motion. And that is what closing in looks like from the outside. Let me zoom out and place this worker angle into the context of the entire investigation, because I think pieces we covered connect in ways that were not visible before. We know the FBI has the camera footage. We know there is a joint task force. We know forensic evidence has been gathered. DNA analysis is moving fast right now, with agents turning to genetic genealogy after the initial database searches came back empty. We know the car connected to people who knew Nancy was held in evidence. We know the Wi-Fi jammer theory raised questions about technical skill and planning. We know the cameras on Nancy's property caught nothing the night she was taken, and investigators themselves describe that as odd. We know the insider knowledge framework has agents focused on people who had close personal familiarity with Nancy. Now add this: the possibility that a contractor or someone in the worker ecosystem, a day laborer, a gardener, or a crew member, spent weeks in the line of sight of Nancy's property without anyone registering them as significant, without Nancy seeing them as significant, without her cameras flagging them as concerning. This possibility does not replace other leads. It lives alongside them. And it opens a question I believe the FBI must answer definitively. Was this a crime that required someone who knew Nancy personally? Or was it a crime that required someone who just knew her neighborhood? Because those are two very different investigative profiles. The insider framework works either way. It just points to different people depending on which kind of insider we are discussing. And right now, the investigation seems focused almost exclusively on personal relationship insiders, which may be exactly right, but agents may have underweighted neighborhood insiders. The gardener's statement is the first public evidence that this might be true. So what exactly should we be watching for in the coming days? A witness came forward with information that could blow this case wide open, but investigators haven't even picked up the phone. We need to see if the gardener who went to the media is finally contacted by the federal agents in charge. If he confirms that investigators reached out, we know this theory has finally forced their hand in a major way. But what happens if weeks of silence follow his public statement? That silence tells a darker story. So watch for the FBI or Pima County sheriffs to finally address the Foothills work crews. A targeted public appeal to those January laborers would be an undeniable sign that this angle is now a formal priority. Next, keep a close watch for any new persons of interest with ties to the local service or construction sectors. I am not predicting a bust, but if one occurs, it proves the worker theory was the key all along. We also need to see if the FBI significantly expands their local canvas. Are they coordinating with community groups or airing Spanish-language appeals across the Tucson television market? Those specific maneuvers would confirm the net is finally widening in the exact direction we have been tracking. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for over 6 weeks now, leaving her family in a state of absolute agony. Savannah Guthrie and this entire community are still waiting for a single piece of real, actionable news. Every minor lead matters in a cold case, and this gardener's testimony might be the most important thread yet. Why haven't they vetted the men working those streets? And why did the cameras fail that night? The surveillance blind spots are haunting because the witness who breaks a case like this is rarely the obvious suspect. It isn't always a cinematic confession or a lucky shot of a face on a doorbell camera. Sometimes it is just a man who was trimming hedges 3 houses away. He saw something unremarkable one morning in January that he didn't realize was a clue, and he has been waiting for months for a detective to simply ask him what he saw. That is the current gap, a witness talking to a journalist, because the authorities simply never bothered to show up. Dozens of workers moved through those streets before Nancy vanished, and they are holding information they don't even know is vital. We are staying on this. Every fresh development and every new scrap of data will be covered here, exactly as we have done from the start. If you have followed this channel, you already know our process. We do not chase rumors. We follow the evidence wherever it leads. We ask the questions the media avoids, and we don't stop until we have real answers for Nancy. If you were working in the Catalina Foothills, or know someone who was, if you were on a job site there in January, you need to contact the investigators right now. A massive $1,200,000 reward is now on the table. $1 million from the Guthrie family, $100,000 from the FBI, and an additional $100,000 from an anonymous crime tip line. Please dial 1-800-CALL-FBI. Submit your tips at tips.fbi.gov because your minor observation could be the missing piece. The most vital witness is often the one who saw the one thing that felt slightly out of place. Share this video to keep the spotlight on Nancy, and tell us in the comments what we should analyze next. Hit subscribe to stay with this investigation because we are not finishing this yet, not even close.